Welcome to More Than a Refresh, a podcast about data and the people who wrangle it. Our guest today is Daniele Varrazzo. He is the primary developer of Psycopg3 and 3, the #1 Python driver for interacting with PostgreSQL. Daniele, who are you and what's your background?
Hi, hello. So my name is Daniele. I am an Italian software developer. I've been living in London in the past, would say 12 years. The last year has been more complex than the others, I guess. And yes, I've been passionate about computers for a long time. I've been interested in free software since I was a uni. And when I stumbled into Python and Postgres, I found a really nice niche with the tools that I needed. And I got interested in the driver, the thing that connected them. So I'm still, I guess, working on it, maintaining it, and making sure that these points works well because I use it every day for my other jobs.
So I have been using Python, and folks who are listening, I am in no way, shape, or form a developer. I can hack things together and make them work. Since the original, Psycopg, are you the original author, or did you take over maintainership and help evolve it?
No, I'm not the original author. I got into the project in a moment in which Psycopg1 was the thing that people was using, and Psycopg2 was an alpha project, which the author was a person from Turin. I didn't know that he was Italian too by then, Federico. So he had this alpha version of a thing that seemed more interesting than the previous one, but it was exploding all over the places. And also, I was still doing Windows development then, and he didn't have any Windows ports. So I started from there, and then I started first submitting bug reports and then some patches. And eventually, he gave up and gave me his subversion commits. And then it happened that a few years after, Federico moved to do C# developments, and he lost interest in the driver. It was a period in which the driver wasn't doing very well. Early 2010, we would say, we had a terrible license. Website went down, mailing list went down. So eventually we needed a kind of to get out of some problems at level projects. And when I understood that Federico wasn't so interested anymore, I took more of a active support. And
That's interesting.
I still have Federico in my background helping every now and then, so it's nice.
It's interesting you bring up a terrible license. That's something that's been a challenge recently in the open source industry as businesses have tried to co-opt what open source and free software means by creating their source available licenses, such as the Elasticsearch license or something like that, but they are not open source. Mm-hmm. What was terrible about the license that you were using at the time?
I think it was, I can't remember what it was, but I think it was a hacked up license with bits of the Zopi license, bits of the OpenSSH license. So it wasn't a standard license. And, so I can't remember what it was, but I remember the scream of the lawyers running away from it.
Oh, so this was driven more by commerce, companies wanting to use the driver, and then they would have the lawyers evaluate the license to see if it was compatible with their legal standing, and the lawyers were not happy with the license, and thus you guys changed it?
Yeah, well, not only, I mean, for instance, eventually we settled for LGPL, which is also a thing that lawyers are not entirely happy with, but still is something standard, is something understood. And I think the problem was that because it was a made up thing, there wasn't any precedence for that, and so probably there was a factor of risk that the original author didn't really want to have.
So you're LGPL now?
Now the driver is LGPL, which again is probably still is not the most standard license in the Postgres world. I'm aware of that.
No, you're right. I mean, obviously in the Postgres world, people will normally look for an Apache 2 license or a BSD style license, even MIT. But in my mind, I've been doing this back since the days of the SLS Linux distribution. The LGPL is actually the most fair of all the licenses because it allows a company to build closed source around it, but it requires that any modification to your project, right, to Psycopg2 or 3 or whatever, those contributions must be given back. And what a lot of people don't understand is that is great as BSD is, or Postgres, or in terms of licensing, or Apache, which I'm a big fan of, liberty-based licensing. It's the LGPL that allowed Linux to flourish, right? Linux would be nothing but an academic project to this day if it wasn't for the ability to compile closed source programs via the LGPL onto Linux. Now, nowadays, it isn't as prevalent, because open source is kind of taking over the market in some ways. But, I remember back in the day when running, weird things like HP Open Manage, right? There was no way you would ever be able to run that on Linux if it wasn't for the LGPL versus the GPL or some of the other ones, because, clearly at the time, HP wasn't going to release Open Manage as, say, a BSD style license. So I think you made a very wise decision, because it allows you the most flexibility, but also endears anyone who wants to modify it. They have to make sure that those changes are available to you for integration if you choose.
Yeah, I think that that is my favorite license. So I think it strikes the right balance between being able to use it without wanting to know everyone what they're doing with it, but still being able to other people to contribute it instead of keeping their secret source and not make it available, which is in this period, it's a bit of a problem, not at library level maybe, but at service level. And people is trying to solve it in different ways, and not all of them are finding sympathy for the rest of the world, I guess.
That's true. Of course, you and I have spoken in the past, and I know that our producer Lindsay has spoken with you about kind of the direction we like to take this podcast. And there's some interesting notes that we've taken through these conversations. And one of the things that has come up is that all the roles that are required to be a successful software developer. Now, before we get into what these roles are, I'm kind of curious as to what you consider a successful software developer. If you were to say in one sentence or two sentences, summarized and boiled down, what is a successful software developer?
No, I think that the need is to keep on being open on what's coming in the future. I've been around here for a good 20 years as a software developer, and things are changing continuously. If you don't embrace it, if you try and make it resistance, you'll be dragged away by the stream. So
that's actually a good point. We're running into that today.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One of the things that, for example, back in 2015, 16, 17, there was a huge revolt against this idea of, say, managed Postgres, we'll say Amazon RDS. And there's nowadays, in our current world, there's the push against things like containers and Kubernetes. And the reality is, especially for people like you and I who've been doing this for so long, if we're not open, if we're not willing to adapt, whatever it is that we're doing is going to die. And a perfect example of that, and something I've used in the past for other projects, is that there's a lot of people out there that don't remember what happened to X386. Do you remember X386?
X3, what is the graphical system for?
Yeah, the X Windows for Linux.
Yeah, the X, yeah, yes.
So where this comes from is that they refuse to adapt. And the X386 project, they decided that they wanted to have a tighter grip on their code, and they wanted people to have less freedom with what they were able to do with their system. And so they added a clause that changed their BSD style license. I don't remember what I think it was an advertising clause. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was enough to where the community itself, since the leadership of the project wouldn't listen to the community took the last commit up to the change to the license, they forked it, and that became the X Windows system that the free desktop.org system that we all run today if we're running Linux. And if you go to the X386 project today, you can go there and it's still up, but there's no development. It's a dead project because the leaders of that project refuse to listen to their users and the community. So I would agree with you because there's a lot of other projects out there that are suffering from this same syndrome now, in that people get so attached to their software that they want it to never change, or they want it to be exactly what it was or what they think it should be, instead of listening to the community and the users. Those community and users are moving on or just no longer participating within that community. And then eventually it's going to stifle and die. So I agree with you. We have to be open. We have to listen. But some specific things that were mentioned is things like you have to be a cognitive psychologist when interviewing customers. You have to be an architect when drawing specifications, and a craftsman, I agree with this, when writing code, and a wrecker when testing it. I'm not sure if those are Lindsay's notes or yours. My favorite here is the first one, which is a cognitive psychologist when interviewing customers, and the last one, which is a wrecker when testing it. Where did these ideas come from? I mean, is this because you're primarily a consultant or something else?
No, well, this is something like I always felt that to be successful as a software developer, I had to wear all those hats. From understanding what people wanted, which is a bit more of a human factor, to starting the process, to kind of not be so in love of what you have done to wanting to hide its defect. So it's just something that I feel like people should either wear all those hats or be a close knit of people who understand that all those things have to be done. Otherwise, you end up either developing something in the vacuum or developing something with the fear of not being able to use it at the scale it will have to be used.
Okay. And I would agree with that. I mean, as you know, Command Prompt's been in business since 97. And, we've been doing Postgres forever. And one of the things that we run into two types of successful clients. And when I say successful, I'm talking about the ability for them to pay the bill. I'm not talking about whether or not they're a good client or a bad client. The first successful type of client is we don't care, just get it done. And they throw money at a problem. And then we have this other type of client that they also throw money at the problem, but they're more interested in solving the problem. And they recognize that the problem is more than just code or a DBA or how they architected the system, although that's certainly important. It's also the process. It's the project management that goes in. It's the human testing. It's the automation. It's making sure that key stakeholders actually understand what is happening with whatever it is they're trying to deploy. Both have pros and cons. We try to lean towards the latter because we believe in people Postgres data, and we believe that if you enable the people portion to be successful, then the data and the Postgres follow all on their own. So I definitely understand where you're coming from with that. I'm going to butcher this name here on my notes, but I'm going to say it anyway. Why is Codice important? Did I get anywhere near correct on that?
No, very far away from that. So it's a codice lieve, which is no, well, it's just my the mean that I'm using now to be free for either taking consultancies or to work on free software. So it's a bit of the structure I'm giving myself after of stopping a long time working as an employee and not having to worry about those things.
So it's more, this is more about, well, in a lot of ways, professional growth and allowing yourself to be more of who you are and develop the things that you want to develop. Okay.
Yes. I'm finding that, well, even if I've worked for a long time for a previous employer, I like to have a variety in the type of things I have to solve. So I'm finding that consultancy outside free software is been appealing in terms of the difference you get to see and how you can reuse your previous experience in different ways.
Well, that's definitely true. I mean, to be a good consultant, you have to be able to, you know, expand on everything that you've taken in, the good and the bad. And it allows you to adapt. I mean, as they say, adapt or die, right? And you can see that in many projects today where they're not adapting and they don't realize it yet, but they're dying because of it. And being able to step out and in a lot of ways get out of your own way in terms of being an employee and step out and be an entrepreneur and independent software developer, you're able to pull from all of your personal and professional experiences. And as long as you can feed yourself, there's a lot of ways that I think that the artistic process in terms of design and creating something beautiful like a Python driver, which a lot of people are like, what do you mean beautiful? Well, code is beautiful. And if you can develop something that is architected, engineered to a specification that was the invention of all of your experiences, that is beautiful. And you can deploy that and make it useful for someone. And I think in a lot of ways, as an independent, you get to go farther with it. When you work for an employer, you are subject to what their goals and their mission is, which isn't a bad thing at all, but it definitely can stifle vision. So I applaud you for taking the leap. You know, I took it a long time ago, but I took it because I can't work for other people. I'm just too stubborn. But to take it to make your life better is fantastic. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears a little bit. We've talked about, you know, consulting and business and, you know, even a little bit of art here, but I'm kind of curious, what are your, and I think you and I are probably going to be on the same page with this, but, you know, the major theme of today is big data. What is it? How do you feel about big data? Talk to me a little bit about that. Just a little bit. I know we can go on for days on this with, you know, a good wine and food, but just talk to me a little bit about big data.
No, well, big data is something that scares me. As in, I see a lot of engineering going on there, which is a lot of crafts that are not really. I don't really feel I understand entirely. I feel like, how do you make a backup of big data? That's probably something where I'm thinking about old way of doing things, projected the new ones. So I don't know. It's
so for you, is it more of a technological problem in terms of dealing with like petabytes of data?
No, well, there is a social, a very deep social aspect to that. It's don't know, feeling like the ownership of everyone is shifting hands, and if you only lose a little bit of that, it's not like you lose a lot, but if you gain a lot of that, you are gaining a lot. And I don't know what is I don't know what is going on there. I don't know what are the big forces that are moving there. It's just I understand that there are going to be battles fought there, and probably they have already been.
I think that they're continuing. I think what scares me the most about big data, and it's not that I don't understand the benefits of it, right? I mean, if we have terabytes and terabytes or petabytes and petabytes of medical data, for example, that will help, in theory, research to cure disease. So, I mean, there is definitely a positive to that. But there's a different type of data, of big data, that's very scary. And it is the type of data that, without naming names, certain cloud providers collect, certain cell phone providers collect, certain governments collect, that it becomes a little scary that there are now it's not just government agencies, right? Everyone knows that we have all countries, right? All countries of any prominence have their intelligence agencies, their listening agencies, and now they're listening to this call because I brought it up. But that's not what we're talking about, because in theory, right, the theory of government is that they work for the people. Now, without getting into whether or not that is true, that is the theory. Whereas corporations don't work for people, they work for shareholders. And shareholders want profit, which means that by and large, if the majority of your shareholders are continuing to see profit through a particular business model, they are not going to want you to change that business model. And that business model could be dangerous for people. And there's a significant concern there. And we've seen it from data security breaches to people getting pictures that they thought were safe that were pulled out of the cloud, to now we have, because of the data analysis capability that we have now, people don't think about this, but that's what a deep fake is, right? When you get a deep fake picture, it's actually data analysis of that picture so that you can put another picture on top of it, and it's very difficult to detect. And that's scary. And I want to put a shout out to one of the great original privacy digital organizations, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation, that's EFF.org, who has been battling a lot of this since you and I were just kids. But yeah, I can see why people would, the people that don't understand it think it's useful and it makes their lives easy. But the people that do understand it should be terrified, because it needs to be managed appropriately and proper privacy controls put in place.
Yeah, I don't feel it's something that there is something inherently bad in that. What I feel is that surprisingly, though, it's been a sort of the biggest challenge to democracy of the don't know, since democracy exists, maybe. As in, it's the first time democracy is not try to be replaced by a dictator, but by something different that we don't know yet.
That's true. That's very true.
I don't know what is that is going on. Maybe not only the problem is with the big data, but even with companies that are so big that become more powerful than entire states.
Well, certainly there's something to be said. There's certain American companies that are big enough to buy countries. And you have to ask yourself if that's a good thing. And in a lot of ways, I mean, you can argue that there are good things that come from it. Not having to pay for 100 different services to handle one problem is a good thing. But on the other hand, it's forcing smaller companies and people, frankly, to adapt in a way that may not be healthy. When your survival is based not on your good works, but it's based on the graciousness of a for-profit corporation who at any point can determine whether or not your product or service is highlighted, or even forget product or service, let's talk about art, right? Whether your latest digital art, photography, or game or whatever is highlighted. If they decide they don't like you for whatever reason, you can be bankrupt in a month. So I agree. There's definitely something that needs to be considered, and I'm pro-capitalist. I mean, I'm a big fan of enabling people to gain anything they can as long as they don't hurt people. But there's definitely shadow concerns there, I would think.
Yeah, I don't know if the perception in the United States is different from in Europe, because I know that there is a very different attitude towards certain things. But for instance, having been living in London for a long time, in these years, I've seen a lot of the economy on the streets disappearing. As in, don't know. For instance, it would be very hard now in the biggest city in Europe to walk in a shop and buy a camera. It's surprisingly hard, and that's because also. Well, it's so easy. People owning a physical shop have expenses and taxes that they cannot avoid. So I don't feel in this moment the play field is entirely balanced. And I feel that every person who loses a job, there is a specialized one, and gain a job as a courier, it doesn't necessarily go in the direction of a more varied society. Something to do there, but I don't know. Of course, I don't know how much the political forces should step into that.
Well, and that's a whole nother question, right? Is when does government step in to, redirect some of these economic forces? In the United States, you have similar issues. I'm not sure about Europe, but in the United States, one of the things that is starting to become popular, not even starting, it is popular, is things like farm to table, where restaurants are getting all of their food from local farms. But I do understand where you're coming from. It's like there's no such thing as a computer store anymore, right? And you're right. You don't go and buy a camera. You go on, Amazon.com or eBay or buy.com or whatever. You read all the reviews of a particular camera, and then it gets drop shipped to your door. Now, that's great in one perspective, because we now have access to things that we never would have had access to before. And I'll give you an example. The COO of Command Prompt struggles a little bit with gluten. So she cannot eat American wheat-based flour. But what she can eat without any problems is 00 Italian wheat flour. If it weren't for Amazon, we wouldn't have access to that. Mm-hmm. But because of Amazon, I can go online and order, 15 pounds, and she can eat it just fine. So that's the plus side of it. But the downside of it, and there's no argument that, there are certain companies out there that really do, and I don't think that it's on purpose. I think it's a byproduct, right? It's a byproduct of society, because people in general will seek the easiest path to get what they want. And if the easiest path is to one-click buy and all of a sudden it shows up on your doorstep, then the local store is going to have difficulty staying in business. I don't have an answer to that. I think that that's more of a shifting environment. And I don't know if it's good or bad. I do know that it's sad, right? I don't know that it is good or bad as much as it just exists, but I think it is a sad thing culturally. But let's shift gears here. You're the author of Psychopg3 and soon to be released. I'm not sure what your ETA is, a Psychopg3. I want to throw this out there, folks. If you're running Django, if you're running Wagtail, if you're running Python in anything that talks to PostgreSQL, you are likely using Psychopg3. And Daniele is also currently working on Psychopg3. And as he mentioned, he's an independent software developer now. And it would be great for all the people that are listening to donate to that. You can on his GitHub page. It's, a lot of people don't realize how much they utilize a free piece of software. And Psychopg, Command Prompt has used Python since the beginning. And the way that we have always talked to Postgres with Python is using one of the versions of Psychopg. And we do sponsor the project, and we would invite everybody else to as well. But beyond that, let's talk about what do you find challenging in developing a driver? So Python is not as strict in certain ways. In some ways, for example, white space is much more strict, but it's not as strict as, say, Postgres when it comes to typing and those types of things. What kind of challenges in developing a modern driver with a modern feature set are you running into with newer versions of Postgres?
Yeah, Postgres is it's pretty educated in not breaking backward compatibility. I mean, Python too as well. Even if we use a low-level C API of Python, it's still relatively easy to move from one version to the other. At least to maintain the previous set of features we had, but we had that set of features probably since Python 2.2, and the language has extended in things that are optional, sure, but people then expect to be able to use them. So the language has grown a lot. Probably in proportion, Python has changed more than Postgres in the same time. Also because we by choice don't try to understand what Python developers are trying to tell to Postgres. We maintain ourselves agnostic to whatever query. So adapting to Postgres is easy, but Python has really changed a lot, and asynchronous support has changed a lot, because you might know that Python thread support is there. It's not true that it's fake or something, especially in IO bound loads. It's totally doable, but it's just not the only way to do IO. And I know at least 5 different ways people want to organize their own program around concurrency with the database. So the challenge is a little bit try to not force one of them specifically, but be neutral and try to support all of them, because each one have their own merits, and I don't think is the place of just a humble driver to be opinionated about the way you organize your projects. So
now that's interesting to me. Although I definitely think that supporting more than one way of doing things is good and valid, I would almost expect that a driver should be opinionated. One of the challenges with, and this actually just happened, we just lost the PostgreSQL project just retired a build farm. And for those that don't know, the build farm is a testing operating system farm for Postgres. For basically, it continuously compiles Postgres against different operating systems and library versions and things like that. And it used to be that we had all kinds of various operating systems on this build farm, but it's getting smaller and smaller. And we just retired Illum OS, which was an open source fork of Solaris, which is the former Sun Microsystems, now Oracle, which is why nobody wants to run it anymore, Unix. And so there's no more testing for that version of the operating system. And in a lot of ways, Postgres is just a library itself, right? It's your data library. You still need to talk to the data library, which is where Psycopg comes from. But the one benefit, I mean, we're losing some cultural history, but the one benefit by these operating systems dropping off is that we're able to focus the optimizations of Postgres for a smaller set of deployable interfaces, right? So very few people run HPUX anymore. Very few people run AIX anymore. I mean, they're out there, don't get me wrong. But predominantly, in terms of general purpose operating systems, we're talking about FreeBSD, we're talking about a Linux of some sort, or we're talking about Microsoft Windows. That's in terms of server, right? I'm not talking, obviously there's Mac OS out there as well. And it certainly is going to create less burden and more opinion on how things should be done because of the less needed choices. Doesn't it make sense that Psycopg would want to say, okay, look, we don't want to truly bind you, and you can, here's the API for this if you want to work with that, but our preference is that you do A or B, not C or D, and you optimize for A and B only? Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. So if I mention that there are kind of 5 different ways that I have on top of my mind of doing a thing, we prefer to support 2 of them. We cannot support one because this is in Python world, it's really a moment in which the asynchronous operation, the explicit asynchronous operation are the thing on which new things are being built on. Others were more of a hack in order to survive better. So for instance, I don't know, green threads were a replacement, a drop-in replacement for operating system threads. And because this is pure Python, they can still be supported. But what I would like to do is more to follow the bridge that is going from multi-thread to async.io. Especially I'm seeing new interesting frameworks that use that are already entirely built on top of that. So fast APIs is very, very nice to work with, for instance. And I would like to be a first-class citizen of fast API, because if I am, then Postgres is. But at the same time, I don't want to drop support for Django, because Django, I know that they are working on the asynchronous, but still for several generations, it will be thread-based. And they are really important bits people rely on. So I feel that we have to do our best to make Postgres able to communicate with those systems. There are a few up-and-coming things. For instance, there is another asynchronous framework that is called Trio. I'll be very happy, but if we can operate with them, but they are experimental. So it's a little bit their responsibility to use whatever fault line, I would say, or just hook, or whatever just under the surface interface to interact with us. Just be nice with them, but without trying to adopt 5 different interfaces at once. Otherwise, yes, of course, it's an explosion of possibilities of things that can go wrong. So it's a little bit of, let's say, I feel responsible for the main ways of doing things, but I'm open if other just take what is available and make more their own part of their own system.
Well, definitely, and I would agree with you on that. Something like a major project like Django, we definitely don't want to leave in the dust. It would not only the ill will that would be created, it's such an important project that we want to make sure that we support that as well. And since they are a big fan of PostgreSQL as well as Python, obviously, and they recommend Psycopg as a driver of choice, we want to make sure that that's capable. Now, there's a lot of things we talked about here, and there's a couple of things that I'm curious. You've kind of perked my interest. Now, obviously, you're a Python fan. What are your thoughts on Rust?
On Rust?
Yes, the Rust language.
I have one tab of my many tabs of my browser in which I'm following their tutorial and try to pick up on it. I find it very interesting. Having written a lot of C, another pain points, and it is something that in some way or the other, definitely I would like to appear in my future as developer. It's one of the 2 modern language there is now affirmed on the horizon. The other probably is Go. I tried Go and didn't really stuck with me. I feel like, I don't know, was doing something better, but not enough to throw everything up in the air. But because C is so old, is so close to the machine, and removed from higher level concepts that, well, it really asks you to do a lot. feel like the position where Rust is trying to address is interesting. So still being a system language, but giving you less guns to shoot your feet, with locks, with critical sections, with concurrency, and with all things that probably grew after C. And then anyway, C was trying to solve problems in the 70s when it was created that were absolutely different from the current reality.
Yeah,
So
that's definitely true.
yeah, I don't say enthusiastic just because I don't know it enough, but I wish I'd become enthusiastic about Go, and when I will have, in the mythical time when I will have less things to do. Definitely, it's one of the things I would like to study better.
Well, I ask for a number of reasons. There's been rumblings from the ecosystem of rewriting PostgreSQL in Rust to allow PostgreSQL to take advantage of a modern language. And it's not that C can't do these things. So for C developers who want to get their hackles up, don't. I'm not suggesting that C is a bad language. But you've made a good point. And for those that don't know, the idea behind Rust is that it is still a systems language. So you get the performance that you're not going to get from some of the higher level languages. But the theory is that if your program compiles in Rust, it will run the way you expect it to run. Whereas with C, and my favorite, non-favorite, Perl, if you write a program in them, they may run and act in a completely unpredictable way. And you may not even know until you get something like we'll see, like a buffer overflow or something like that. And that's kind of where people are being drawn to with Rust. It also helps that Rust has a vibrant and passionate community. You don't really hear anybody standing at the rooftops anymore yelling about how awesome the C programming language is. But you can hear that about Rust. You can hear that about Python. You certainly can hear about Go. Even though I find Go kind of weird too. I've never understood why I would run Go over C# or Java, right? I know there's reasons. But from someone who is not a hardcore developer, someone who, when he does development, is to solve a very specific problem, usually around automation, I've never really engaged in that. But yeah, it would be interesting. There's a new library out there called PGX, which greatly bridges the divide between Rust and PostgreSQL, and it's open source. And that's kind of why I brought it up, because you're also a library developer. So let me ask you this. There's a couple of theoretical, ideological ideas that we have here. But the first thing, before we get into that, I'd like to know, you're developing this new version. The old version worked fine. I'm not saying that it was there was things that it didn't do, and there are things that it does do, and it works great. But PsycopG3, what is the particular features, the built-in features that you're building that you say to yourself, it's about time, or this is going to be fantastic, or this is really intuitive, those types of things?
Well, there are a few things I'm really happy about of having surpassed some previous, let's say, weak points. But hopefully, the idea is that people shouldn't notice that much. As in, we have solved hard problems, and you won't even notice. It's a nice place to. It's a nice thing to think about. The different asynchronous interface is probably the most visible thing, because simply now you can use this library, whereas in the previously, well, you couldn't. There was a wrapper around async.io for PsycopG, but is non-native, and I think it stopped at sharp version 1.0.0. That means it's not really so maintained and so active. Probably was an itch someone needed to scratch, but we would like to do something a little bit more industrial scale about it. type adaptation is an entirely new thing, because we used to adapt Py types to on the client side, so using whatever snippet of SQL was handy. And now that we have to do real parameters, I've discovered all the possible things that can go wrong in that. So now I think I've solved all the outstanding issues there, like I don't know, the exotic stuff, like what type you convert an empty list, because in Python an empty list is a list, and in Postgres it could be any possible type, and what you say to Postgres to not make it explode. But this is one of the things that where probably people won't notice, and if they don't notice, it's a great success, because the alternative is that they should have rewritten every query they've written by adding explicit cast, which would be a non-starter for a driver that would like to replace something that used to work. And then now I'm working a lot on the connection pool, which was a very weak bit of the previous adapter. It was, let's say, unreliable in the sense that if you ask too much, it will throw you an exception. And now there is a orderly waiting queue, so it can throttle down the pressure. It recovers better from failures. So I would like to have it more a place that you put there and forget in the middle of a concurrent program, which you don't know how much load is going to have. So this is a thing that I've seen. Other non-database driver, but for instance, RabbitMQ interfaces, Redis interfaces, they more or less all have a concept of there is a connection and there is a pool of connection built in the driver. And I feel like the Psycopg3 pool is the thing that has been the most neglected. When I've added more and more tests to the test suites, I never added so many for the pool. And because maybe I didn't use it that much myself, it's not being my itch to scratch. But now I feel like that's another place that is going to be relatively strategic in say, okay, you can take this project, you can put it in the middle of this program of yours, and it will behave well. It will behave the way you expect it to do.
So that's interesting to me. Now the async IO, I don't want to lessen the importance of that. That's obviously very important, considering, frankly, the asynchronous nature of everything that we do now in terms of the internet. But the connection pooling is particularly interesting to me because it's a problem that has been solved, right? It's not something we can connect Psycopg to, say, PG Bouncer or PG Pool or Heimdall or any number of things. Why would you want to create more complexity? Now, I get the feature perspective, don't get me wrong, but there was once upon a time a theory where you built a program to do one thing and you tied together many programs to achieve many things. Now, in the old days, it was, via a pipe or a redirect or whatever, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting we go back to that. But why would we want built-in connection pooling into our Python PostgreSQL driver when we're already know that we're going to be talking to, say, PG Bouncer?
Yeah, so I've been thinking for a while to not have it altogether because of this. I've been thinking for a while to have it as an external package, but honestly it would have been just an excuse to jettison the responsibility out of myself. And eventually I thought that it is sort of needed. I mean, getting a connection out of a PG Bouncer means anyway to require it from an external process. So there is a few layers of network communication and out-of-process communication that impacts performance. And also it's another moving part that you have to add to your program, which now is no more the database and the application server, but there is the database, PG Bouncer, and the application server. Each one they have to have their own name in the network, their own deployments, and they'll fail over. PG Bouncer is not entirely transparent in the way of what happens to a connection managed to it. You can make it so, but let's say it's absolutely not a trivial piece of infrastructure to drop into an existing infrastructure. So my idea would be to be able to use a pool at a lower, simpler level, which is in process. So it's more understandable being a Python thing. If you get an error, it's a Python error rather than a service from the outside has answered you something it is unhappy of. Um, I would say that it gives you a choice of what sort of complexity you want to maintain. So a bit more of a code complexity, which hopefully we PsycopG developers should be the one responsible of managing, versus the DevOps complexity of adding another, don't know, another container, adding another bit of Ansible description in order to have another moving part in the system outside of the programs.
I can definitely see that. I think from my perspective, the challenge, of course, is, for example, when we would work with, say, Tomcat or Jakarta, and it's got its own middleware connection pulling, which is actually quite good. But then you would get into the, architects that would have its connection pulling connecting to PG Bouncer or PG Pool, then connecting to Postgres, and they wouldn't understand why. Right? Why would you do that versus and trying to diagnose problems within that many layers? So it definitely makes sense that you would end up in an environment where your driver is handling whatever it is you need to do in terms of connecting and talking to Postgres. The driver handles that. So SSL, connection pooling, async IO, data type translation, maybe certain macros or methods that make certain things easier, instead of breaking it down so that you do have all these different components. And one of the things people vastly underestimate in this discussion is the power of network latency. And if you have every layer that you creates a level of latency between the person requesting the data and where the data is. So if we have our connection pooling that's stable and production quality, I will avoid the word robust, within our driver itself, then we're reducing the complexity to the developer and we're reducing the complexity to the user who's trying to retrieve data. And then also we're increasing performance by decreasing things like network latency. So I do think it's a good idea, but I also think it's something that needs to be addressed by the driver authors, because there's certainly been a lot of energy and resources put into things like PG Pool or PG Bouncer. And they are great pieces of software, but you do start to wonder at what point are they in the way. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that to be negative, but by having a Python application and Python, framework to harness your data, if it solves some of the lower level architectural needs, you do in fact have a simpler architecture. And things like PG Bouncer would get in the way of that. Okay, so we talked about the async IO and the connection pooling. Obviously, those are great features of PsycopG. Is there an ETA for it? Do you think that, obviously it's open source, so when it's done, it's done. But, people who are relying on the driver, who are sponsoring the driver, certainly they want to have a feeling of when they can see at least a beta or an RC or something that they can, use.
Yeah, I would like, I'm aiming to April, so it's close. I've seen already many of the tickets and the board I'm tracking the project on, which is on GitHub. They're as migrated now on the right hand side, so it's going good. It's going okay. I would like to work now. We are well. It's just started in March. I would say that aiming to April to have something January available it's been for a long time that I've had this as a target, and I'm still aiming for it. So I would say sometimes in April I wouldn't mind putting some sort of package pip installable for people to try it out. That probably doesn't mean that I want to cover all the possible features, including the most complex ones. So probably I would leave the more important, but things that are chapter on their own outside, maybe for the non, maybe a 3.1 version 3.1. So thinking about large objects, thinking about replication. Those are all big topics, and I don't think those will be covered in the first release. Also because they bolt on a backbone, and I'll be happier to create this backbone better instead of just thinking about all the details.
Now, you just
So
dropped a keyword there that I'm kind of curious about. Replication. What are you thinking there?
Well, I'm not so expert because replication is one of the few things that in Psycopg3 has been developed by other people. The only big feature that has been given by other people in that area, and I've been a user of it. I've been a user of replication in Psycopg. I say, oh, look at that! It works very nice, and it was a pleasant surprise.
So is the idea that the Psycopg driver, especially with 2 and even more importantly 3, is it? I run a data query, insert, update, delete, and it will actually grab that query and replicate to multiple sources instead of using the native PostgreSQL replication?
No, I'm talking about, for instance, either doing physical replication or even better would be logical replication. So pretty much writing a stream of changes out of the wall and do something interesting with that, which could be from trivially shipping to somewhere else to parsing and do let's say follow the events that are driven by the stream of events of the wall.
Okay, so this is a little different. All right, so what you're actually, what I think you're talking about is the ability to interact with logical decoding, retrieve the stream of changes that are happening, whether they be events or whatever, and then take that and do something with it. You're not talking about the PostgreSQL replacing the internal binary or even internal logical replication of PostgreSQL between the databases as much as being a broker of the data to potentially other sources.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense. Okay, I was all of a sudden I'm like, are you building multi-master into this driver? I was a little confused.
No. Let's keep it. Let's keep it small. Let's keep it. I mean, it's at the level of listening on a replication stream, of which a logical replication stream is more useful, at least because I assume you want to do something where you understand the data that goes through and do something that is out of the just out of the stream of sending this data to a database downstream. So no, we're talking about decoding the logical replication here.
Okay. All right. So, hey, I meant to bring this up earlier, but we got wrapped up in a few things. My understanding is that you, as a self-care enjoyment, you enjoy photography. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
What kind of photography? I mean, is it, is it nature, nature photography, or black and whites, or stills, or wide frame? What kind of stuff do you like?
So I like outdoor, and so I thought, okay, I'm gonna do landscape from the beginning to the end. But then, of course, living in London, the landscape you find is more about people. So I ended up doing a bit more street photography than nature photography, more than I expected.
Well, what I would imagine from London is that your photography is inadvertently black and white from your weather.
No, it's not. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. London is a lucky corner of that island, but probably that would be the case if you go a bit more north or west. Although, well, after many years there as a Mediterranean person, I feel the need of a bit more sun. It's not that terrible. It's been the period in my life in which I've used the bicycle the most. And now I'm enjoying carrying a camera when I travel. So it's taking the burden of bringing a couple of lenses and a tripod, and so planning a bit better my movements, and just like, I guess, what is called travel photographer. Just trying to see what I'm seeing around me when I move around, and give it the best interpretation.
Well, as I mentioned before we started recording, we're currently in Utah, which is one of the most photographed areas in the world. And if you haven't been here, I would recommend it, and make sure that you can spend a lot of time, because you get everything from Arches National Park, which is on the eastern side of Utah. And then you've got Bryce with hoodoos. I recommend you look those up. They're pretty impressive. Photography is kind of it's a hobby for me. It's a passion for our COO, Amanda. And one of the things that we like to do is, when we're doing our professional development writing or blogs for various things like PostgresConf and things like that, is we include our own pictures, right? Instead of incorporating any random clip art, we incorporate our own photography, because it adds interest and lends itself to the whole people idea of people Postgres data. And because of that, we would love it if you had some photography that you would like to share, so that when we publish this podcast, that we can add an element of, sure, Daniela is an awesome developer creating this widely useful software, who is, in my opinion, too humble about it. But he's also more than that, right? He does this, like you said, street photography and the travel photography. And I think it lends itself to an understanding of who the people are behind the software that we're all using. So if you would do that, that'd be fantastic. I want to touch on something a little bit here. You said it yourself. You said it's a humble driver. We shouldn't do XYZ because it's a humble driver. Python is one of the most widely used languages in the world, and I am not in any shape or form suggesting it should be an arrogant driver, because then it will no longer be widely used. But I think that there's a certain visibility that needs to be brought about in our community. And when I'm talking about community, I'm talking about PostgreSQL. That I don't think the drivers themselves and the driver authors necessarily get the recognition they deserve, because PostgreSQL by itself is awesome. No, there's zero argument that PostgreSQL is awesome. It's provided me and you with our life, our professional life. But on its own, by itself, it's not that useful. It has to be interfaced in some way. And something like Psycopg is what gives that interface. And so I wonder if, I don't know, maybe, and obviously this would be kind of weird because, language developers tend to attach to a particular language, right? I write Java, I love Java, this is Java. But it seems like there should be a secondary or an ancillary open source project that is a collaboration between Python, yourself, and Dave Kramer with JDBC, and I don't remember who's writing the .NET driver, but these types of things, so that we don't have 50 different drivers for 50 different things. Instead, we have one project driving a more stable reference implementation of drivers for Postgres. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Well, the end user as in if Postgres is on one side, then there is an end user on the other side. um, Encompass a wide spectrum of, I guess, attitudes toward software developments, because definitely there is a difference of attitude between who can be a Java person, a C# person, a Python person, and many other languages person. A Thinking about the more in the past, the Perl people, and more in the future, the Go and Rust people. So I think that if we wanted to create a merger between all those, it would be a big battle in people trying to have their own paradigm, the paradigm of their own system prevailing on the other.
No, I definitely agree with you. I mean,
Uh,
language developers are passionate, but my thought process was, for example, in the Python world, there's PEPs, PEPs, right, where a proposal is put forth to the developers to adopt what is essentially an RFC for Python for whatever feature. I think that it would be interesting if there was a similar project that was language agnostic in terms of the reference implementation, right? Where if you were to open up the Postgres API reference manual for external driver writers, there would be basically a list of various ways that is considered canonical for interfacing with Postgres for X, whatever X is. Now, obviously, Java is going to do it a little different than Python. Python's going to do it a little different than PHP or whatever. But knowing that these core features or these core implementations of, say, data type stricting or something like that might make it easier for everybody, because you have a collective mind of all these brilliant people trying to deliver something that is expected, right? Never works in an unexpected way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but so what happened is that before Postgres, there has been this was a time in which I wasn't involved in Python, but there was a sort of a group of interest group in driver developers, where they designed an interface, a sort of a guideline that every database driver had to solve. So in a way, it's a sort of the complementary problem. So in a language, I understand that people has to commoditize the databases by giving all of them a similar interface that works well with the language. So doing it the other way, in a way you did it, because in a way the libpq is the client's interface, the C client interface for Postgres. In a way, do that because it sort of establish a few important things that cannot be changed, a few important things along which the communication has to go. And probably a step under it is there is the front end back end protocol. But I would say that every driver that doesn't try to play nicely with that has a harder life, of course. So in a way, Postgres provides a sort of guideline where it would like a driver would be to be developed. And I think that's what stays outside of it, which is, for instance, the way types are adapted, or whether the communication is synchronous or asynchronous. I would say that every language will have their own way of doing that. I don't know if there is a JavaScript driver for Postgres, but if there is, probably it uses the JavaScript features. What are the things that JavaScript does concurrency? Or
I'm not sure if there's a way to write JavaScript programs for Postgres. There is definitely a way to write JavaScript procedures, right, using PLV8. But I'm not sure of the other one. The one that came to mind for me would be, your non-C based programs, right? So Python is essentially, an extension and wrapper, a higher level interface to C, and thus libpq for psycopg. And that's the same with Perl and Ruby and PHP. But for example, Rust, which is completely different, is not using libpq. It's speaking, as I understand it, it actually speaks the protocol directly. And you're right. I mean, it definitely will create a barrier or a higher lift to be able to do it correctly, but it also gives you some flexibility that you might not otherwise have. All right, so here's a random question. If you were to ask, let's say the world is listening. I wish the world was listening. We're not that big yet. We'll get there. What would you ask the world to, what would be a question you would ask the world? And this can be a technical question, it can be a use case question, or it could just be something random like, why do you prefer blue sky? It doesn't really matter. But what would you ask the world?
Wow, that's a large question. I guess I cannot ask for infinite speed of light, or I guess so. Let's seeking in the realm of physics. I don't know. I just see that just a level of communication around software project, but not only around software project. I feel like internet is getting the worst out of certain people, and I wish like who exposes themselves to their own deeper interest, which could be writing a Python driver, yes, but also stating their preferences in any possible fields of their life. They wouldn't be attacked as weak, as diverse. So I would really like, if I could ask, to to be kinder with people who are brave enough to expose themselves in public.
I think that you touched on something that is a lot deeper than a lot of people think. There's a lot of people on the internet, especially with social media, where not necessarily people that are, I don't want to say normal. Normal's the wrong word, but let's say balanced. But there are a lot of people out there that the internet has given a channel of communication where they may not be the best communicators, but they're trying to get a point across. It might be a point about themselves. It might be a point about their family or their job or whatever. It may just be a communication error, a buffer overflow, and then they get attacked. And it's very easy for us as people, as we're behind a screen, to forget that there's a human on the other side of the screen. And if they post something, and instead of trying to understand where they're coming from, you just attack them, or my favorite term of the day is cancel them, instead of allowing a person to grow or allowing yourself to grow, you've actually become part of the problem. So I would agree with you. I think that everyone needs to step back. We need to be mature adults. We need to be open. And you don't have to agree with everybody. There's no global, spiritual, existential right answer. If there was, we wouldn't have disagreements. So instead of the next time you want to throw a slur or hate or anger, or even just shut someone down for their particular opinion, instead, if you take a step back, be objective, possibly engage with the person, not only may they learn something, you may learn something, and you might even make, and I don't want to sound Mr. Rogers about this, but you might even make a friend. And I think that would make the world better. So I think that you've definitely touched on something there. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Daniela, it's been fantastic. We'd love to have you on again. Is there any final words you'd like to give to our listeners?
I don't know. Be good. No, I don't have a final word. I just thank you very much for the opportunity to have this conversation. It was very nice. And actually, well, there is something that thinking about the stuff I'm doing a bit. It's been stepping out of the comfort zone in the last year, stepping out of the known path about way of what to do with yourself. I think there has been a great experience. So I would encourage people to follow what they feel like doing, even if for a window of their time is just for a moment, or they could be surprised by the how nice it is to put yourself out of the comfort zone and try something new.
I'm 100% behind you. The term we like to use is get out of your own way. And with that, thank you again for your time. We'd love to have you on again. Thank you for all of your efforts with PsycopG. It has made millions of lives easier when we're dealing with Python. And listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this. And everyone, take care.